Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figure It Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here. Today we're going to be talking about a brand new Sega Dreamcast controller by Retro Fighters that is wireless. It is called the Striker DC, and I'm excited to talk all about it, so let's do that. But before we do, if you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, as well as check out all the social media stuff in the description: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, my travel channel. I appreciate the support on all those platforms. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Now, full disclosure on this, Retro Fighters, the company that made this, was cool enough to send this to me for free for the purposes of review, so now we can talk about it. If you're interested in it, there's a link in the description. You can check it out. As you can see here, they sent me 3 of them. The first is the original gray controller design. This is meant to match the color scheme of the original Sega Dreamcast controller. This is also the one I've obviously been using. I've had it for a couple of weeks, and I've been checking it out and making sure I kind of, know all the ins and outs as best I can here. They also sent me 2 additional ones. One is blue that matches, there was a blue transparent Sega Dreamcast controller. It's meant to be color toned with that. And then the limited edition black one. I don't know if you can still get this one. This one was actually, they only made 2,000 of those. So that was very cool for them to send to me. As a huge Sega Dreamcast fan, I really appreciate that. So the controller itself is actually the second time Retro Fighters has made a controller for the Dreamcast. Retro Fighters makes tons of more modern day ergonomic controllers, basically, let's say Xbox 360 style controllers for retro consoles. It's a thing. I've done reviews on tons of them. I think they make really good stuff. This one has a lot of nice weight to it. It feels really solid. And as I said, it is the second time they've done a Dreamcast controller. The first one they did was over here. This is the original Retro Fighters Striker DC. This, as you might, it's pretty obvious, is a wired controller that also had 2 VMU slots in it, and we will talk more about that in a second. So let's do like a quasi mini unboxing. I'm not going to really unbox it because I'll basically just say how it came. But you see the big box there. We'll go over the details of what's in it. But inside it came with these like 2 orange cardboard boxes and a quick start guide. The quick start guide is just a little bit of basic information on how to pair the system, what the LED indicators suggest, which is basically like, player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4. It just shows you that. It talks about firmware updates and how you can check for that online by using just a QR code. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to this. It's not that complicated. And then the 2 orange boxes, the bigger one, logically, contained the controller itself, as well as I believe it also had this USB-C controller in it, or cable in it. This is how you, of course, connect the system, or connect the controller to any sort of USB outlet for power, which, by the way, like any controller or any battery, lithium-ion battery-based device, when you get it, charge it to full before you actually use it, which is what I did. The other orange box contains the connection dongle, which is right here. Now, the connection dongle is obviously very important. This is how the device communicates with the Sega Dreamcast, and it also, of course, has a VMU slot on it, allowing you to put VMUs in there or memory cards in there to be able to save your games. So that's kind of the basics. With that out of the way, we can talk about some of the features before I go into stuff I noticed. So let's just read the back of the box, shall we? The Striker DC Wireless is a cutting-edge controller designed to provide an unparalleled gaming experience for Dreamcast enthusiasts, which, yes, admittedly I am. With its sleek and ergonomic design, this controller offers a range of features that set it apart from others in its class. The Striker DC boasts an ergonomically designed layout, ensuring comfort during extended gameplay sessions. Equipped with next-generation Hall effect analog sticks, the Striker DC wirelessly eliminates any potential drift issues. Elevate your gaming to new heights with the Striker DC Dreamcast wireless controller, compatible with the original Sega Dreamcast, which, by the way, there's a little bit of an asterisk to that. It's like, duh, obviously it's compatible with the Dreamcast. The reason they put that on there, I'm pretty sure, is because most Retro Fighters controllers have additional compatibility with other platforms. Usually it's the Nintendo Switch, other times it's PC or Mac or whatever. This one is just Dreamcast, nothing else. It's possible a firmware update will come at some point that at least allows it to connect to a PC, so you can use it for, like, say, emulators on a PC when you play the Dreamcast. But as of now, this is just Dreamcast hardware. No drift Hall effect analog sticks, VMU dock included, 2.4 gigahertz wireless technology for low latency, 30-foot wireless range, vibration feedback included, which is important, meaning the vibration function is built in. Updatable firmware, as we mentioned before. comfortable and accurate D-pad, turbo functionality, which to be honest I never used, comfortable and ergonomic design, which I agree with, USB-C rechargeable battery, and 10 plus hours of battery life per charge, which by the way, it didn't take very long to charge. I think it only took about an hour to charge it. So yeah, that's their basic elevator pitch. So let's talk about how it actually goes to a Dreamcast enthusiast. Now that's the thing. I actually think this controller is really good. Like, the build quality seems pretty solid to me. It's got a nice weight to it. Buttons are very clicky and effective. I'm very mixed on the thumbstick. I think most people would think this thumbstick was better than the original. Because the Dreamcast is my favorite game console of all time, I very much have fallen in love with that controller over time, which I know a lot of people, especially younger people, don't get it. But it was perfect for the games it was designed for. When it was designed, the whole idea of an ergonomic controller like this with 2 thumbsticks was not a thing. Anyway, so I fell in love with it, but also the thumbstick in particular on the Dreamcast controller, I've just gotten very used to. All I'm trying to say is that this one takes me a little time to get used to, so my muscle memory on games when playing with this isn't as effective, at least initially. That's all I'm trying to say. That said, it's not a bad thing. It's more of a me thing, if anything else. But I like it just fine. But it's my one, hang up to actually play with it is I think I prefer the original thumbsticks. That's all I'm saying. As far as the triggers, this is an interesting observation. So obviously they put 4 on here. Well, the Dreamcast only had 2, so what was the deal with that? They basically just repeated the functionality in 2 different types of triggers. So some games where it's a racing game, you might want more control over that trigger for acceleration and things like that. They gave you that option, but they also put on more of a quick digital type of button that would be more effective for fighting games. Again, the name of the company is Retro Fighters. These controllers are really designed more for fighting games than anything else. You can obviously use them on other Dreamcast games, which I did. I played racing games like Crazy Taxi, if you want to call that a racing game, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. I even played non-racing games, things like Shenmue, Sonic Adventure, etc. I was playing a bunch of these games with this controller just to kind of get the vibe of it, and even though none of those are fighting games, I found the experience very solid and rewarding. So I can overall recommend it in that sense. I think it was great. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, the most obvious thing about it that is different, which is the fact that it does not have the VMU slot on it and what effect that might have. So for those who don't know yet, are still in this video at this point, the Sega Dreamcast had a thing called a VMU. This is how it would save data in game, so as you're making progress, whatever, you can come back and play the game later and pick up where you left off. The said VMU was based off the whole Tamagotchi craze, and this is effectively a memory card with a little screen in it. Now, because it had a screen in it, that had potential developer benefits, and you would put it right into the center of your controller. Now, that meant that developers could use it in a number of ways. Now, to be honest with you, most developers didn't really use it for much. Some games would have little bonus mini games where within game you could download extra content and then play it on the VMU on the go. Power Stone is a great example of this, where you would download this little mini game and then you'd have this little shoot 'em up on your VMU. Or things like Sonic Adventure, where they'd give you like a little pet to raise in the game, and then you could take the pet out and play it on the VMU portably. That sort of functionality is still in this because it works with this the dongle. So any sort of content like that, like those 2 examples, you can just set up right there and then take it out if you really want to go play them. You can still do that. The other types of most of the time though, developers didn't do much with it. Like Shenmue, for example, or Crazy Taxi, they didn't really utilize it in any special way. They just kind of displayed something on the screen while you were playing. That functionality still exists. It's just that it's happening over here wherever your dongle is set up. It's no longer happening within the controller. For that purpose, at least I assume that's why they did this, the dongle is interesting in the fact that it's got rubber feet, it's weighted, and it's even angled. Presumably, depending on how you have the system set up, you should be able to glance down at it and see those type of little icons and moments. But again, most of those are kind of useless. Where it's kind of a gray area is the games that actually used the VMU meaningfully with the understanding it was in your controller. Now, to be fair, there weren't many examples of that. Off the top of my head, the ones that come to mind was the Resident Evil games. When you're playing the Resident Evil games on Dreamcast, they do not display your health anywhere on the screen. Now, to be fair, they never did in any version of it. You would have to go into the menu to check your health situation. On the Dreamcast, though, the nice thing about the VMU is that it would always show your health situation. So you could just glance down at your controller and see if the character needed to be, have take an herb and feel better, whatever it was. You could see that. that. Now you kind of can't unless you can see the screen wherever the dongle is, which theoretically you might be far from it since the whole point of a wireless controller is not to sit right next to the console. So there's an argument there. And then other games like the NFL 2K games or hand egg games, whatever you want to think of them as, they actually had a neat feature in them, and I can't believe I'm giving a point to hand egg here, but most sports games, most football games, hand egg, whatever, when you're playing multiplayer, they have no choice but to show the plays of both sides on the screen, thus kind of defeating the point of a strategy game that is supposed to be hand egg, because you can see what the other team's going to do. Uniquely on the Dreamcast, because of the presence of the VMU screen, your plays would appear on the VMU and the other player could not see them, thus making it more strategic. But because that's not built into your controller anymore, you thus now either can't see it depending on how you're sitting, or you kind of have to look over and notice it. And again, if you're in some group party, that kind of screws everybody. Now, those are small examples, and there was never going to be a perfect solution to this. However, it does present the possibility, because there is no VMU slot on the controller anymore, that there's other accessory issues as well, but not so much in the North American library. There are other things like the memory cards, obviously we talked about, any sort of... There were third-party memory cards that didn't have a screen. All that stuff works fine. The jump pack, as I said before, the Dreamcast supported vibration. However, it wasn't built into the controller. Like the Nintendo 64, they just built a separate attachment, and you just put that into the controller, and that's how your vibration would be fed. Now, fortunately, Retro Fighters thought of this. So Rumble is actually built into the controller. So they completely get a pass on that one. They completely solved that problem. But there are other accessories like the microphone. Now, the microphone was only used in a handful of games. In the North American library, I believe there was only 2 that supported it, which was most infamously Seaman with Leonard Nimoy, as well as Alien Front Online, which I think is mostly useless now anyway. So that's not that big of a deal. There are some exclusive European releases. I think Planet Ring, which is also mostly a dead game because it actually requires to be online to be able to use it. Then there's some Japanese releases. There's, what's the name? It's Shanghai something, so like whatever, it's Mahjong type of game that required it. Then there's a few others on the Japanese Dreamcast library, as well as things like the Dream Eye, which was an accessory that used a microphone and a webcam. Stuff like that might have certain compatibility issues with this particular setup. The microphone should still theoretically work. You might just have an awkward setup for it because you mostly would have to like lean into your console to talk at it. So my point is, the slot being on the controller does only technically present an issue in some use cases, but the truth is, rarely will it ever actually be a legitimate problem. So if you're wondering why did they do that, why didn't they just put the slot on like they did originally, there's actually a pretty good answer for that. There's 3 obvious problems. The first, probably not initially obvious, is the weight factor. Now, as much as I love the Retro Fighters controller with the VMU and the jump pack in there, it is noticeably heavier, which, to be fair, was a problem with the Dreamcast controller originally anyway, but it is a thing. And it's just, when you're doing competitive fighting games, particularly, which is mostly what they're going for here, probably you don't want too much extra weight in the controller. So that's a small one. I can understand why people would argue against that. The second and the most obvious reason is power consumption. The VMU requires power to run. It is a screen after all. And so normally with the original setup, that's not a problem because it's getting all its power from the Dreamcast itself. However, if you make it wireless, it then has to completely feed off of the controller's power supply. And if that's the case, well, that's when your controller's battery life gets substantially reduced. Thus, you'd have to recharge it more, thus it'd be plugged in a lot, thus defeating the point of having a wireless controller. So with lithium-ion battery technology being as limited as it currently is until humanity finds a better type of battery, this is kind of what we're stuck with. So that one's a legitimate case and probably the most obvious. But the third one that's probably least obvious and actually maybe the most substantial is data corruption. The Dreamcast has to communicate with the VMU to be able to save your game data. And over a hardline controller connection, that's easy and stable. Over an unintended wireless connection the Dreamcast was never meant to experience, yeah, your game saves could theoretically get corrupted due to either power issues or connection issues, walking out of range while trying to save something, and the Dreamcast may not have a mechanism to be able to handle that since it wouldn't know why it was corrupted in the first place. Thus, your files could get corrupted. that's not typically a good idea to send data over a system that wasn't meant for it, is really the whole point there. So I completely understand what they did and why they did it. It's just the nostalgic part of me gets a little sad about the fact that I can't play Resident Evil with the screen right there. You know what I mean? But that's not that big of a deal. So as far as actual usage, so we're going to talk about that now. Let's go ahead and show you the thing in action. First and foremost, to pair the controller and to make sure everything's in safe operation, make sure the dongle is connected prior to the Dreamcast being turned on. And this would apply not only to the Retro Fighters controllers, but original controllers, any controllers. The Dreamcast has a hardware defect in it where if you unplug and plug controllers in and out while the system is on, there is a high chance of popping a fuse on the controller port board. And if you do that, the Dreamcast will no longer be able to read controllers until you fix the fuse. There have been so many Dreamcasts sadly sent to a grave where people thought they permanently broke the system because of that, when in reality a simple fuse would have fixed it. So don't make that mistake. So in our case, we will fire it up here. You'll hear that familiar beep, and then it's time to sync the controller. Now, syncing the controller is relatively simple. Once the dongle here is just kind of searching for a signal with a little red light on it, you take your controller, you press start, and that's pretty much it. If you have any issues getting it to sync beyond that, there is another sync button on here, and you can press this button as well to sync and find them and pair them, but really I had no problem. So we're going to go ahead and get past this. I have the mode installed in this Dreamcast. This is a DC HDMI modified Dreamcast with the ODE in it, 2 terabyte SSD. This is my ultimate monster Dreamcast. For our purposes, I want to actually show you a game from the Atomic Wave set. I've asked in the past, and I'm asking again, do you guys want me to do a video on Atomic Wave stuff? If you're unfamiliar with the Atomic Wave, in around 2003, after the Dreamcast was effectively over, Sega basically decided to recycle the hardware for an arcade cabinet set called the Atomic Wave, and they made new games for it, which were basically just Dreamcast games that required more read speed. There's the logo and everything. They don't work off disk in most cases, but off of things like the mode, they do, because it eliminates the disk drive issue. In other words, there was like an extra like 20 sorta Dreamcast games released that it would be kind of fun to go over. So I'm curious what people think. But anyway, these games are good for this because a lot of them are fighting games and a lot of them are things like run and guns and shoot 'em ups and stuff like that. I think there's some racing games in there. But it's also just kind of good to give you a sense of like quick timing on the controller to be able to test things like latency and so on and so forth, which I really didn't experience, although I can't see what I'm doing, so this might not have been the wisest setup, but you get it. Yeah, this is a fun game. Kind of like a Metal Slug, which incidentally Metal Slug 6 was part of the Atomic Wave set, so it totally is playable. Yeah, I can't see what I'm doing, but you guys get the idea. If I die, it's not because of the controller, it's because I can't see what I'm doing. But yeah, you get it. It works perfectly fine, looks great, and oh, there's a big tank dude. This game's really fun, by the way. This is actually one of the ones that you can get to run off disk, by the way, but I would recommend running it through an ODE. But anyway, you guys get the idea. It's paired, it works just fine. I had no issues with that. It will continue to search for a signal once the console's off until after a minute when it realizes everything's good. Now the controller itself, as I said, it has the 2 trigger buttons. It has a bonus sync button at the top next to the USB-C port. Has the 4 obvious face buttons, start button, the D-pad, which is very nice, the trigger, or the joystick, which I already talked about. In addition to that, it has a turbo and clear button for turbo functionality. The back is very nice, actually. It's hard molded into the plastic to say Retro Fighters Striker DC, so it's not just a basic sticker, which is very cool. But yeah, I think the build quality of it is solid. It feels very smooth, like almost like a matte surface. And I think it's very nice. But yeah, if you want to do this, I don't know how much better of a wireless Dreamcast controller experience you're ever going to get. I know Retrobit is working on their own, and they've been working on it for years. It's more in the style of the original Dreamcast controller, but I can almost guarantee you the problem they keep coming around to is how to supply enough power to the VMU and have people not hate it. The only suggestion I would have here, and it's not a real suggestion because it defies reality, would be in a fantasy world where battery technology is not a problem, so already this scenario is ridiculous, and where economics are not a problem, so again, the scenario is ridiculous. It would have been cool if the controller could have just had a replica screen on it that can effectively mirror whatever the VMU is doing. That way you don't have to deal with data connection problems, but you can see whatever it's seeing. I don't know if you guys saw that Octopus arcade stick I did a video on. They actually built a new, more modern screen for the Dreamcast VMU that looks amazing. It would be nice to see something like that built into the controller. But of course, they have the advantage they can plug it into the system for power. They don't have to deal with battery problems, and they're not trying to basically replicate and clone a signal that's existing in a different source. So I get it, But in a fantasy world, it just sounds nice to me. But yeah, the engineer part would be like, yeah, no, that's insane. But all the same, it would be very cool. So yeah, huge shout out to Retro Fighters. I think the controller is really great. If you guys want to check it out, there will be a link in the description. Again, the black one is limited edition, 2,000 units, and that's all she wrote. The other ones should be readily available if you want to check that out as well. So yeah, thank you to them. Obviously, thank you guys very much for watching. If you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, as well as check out all the social media stuff in the description. I've got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon. Really appreciate the support over there. Spreadshirt, travel channel. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all later.